It was just after midnight, when my phone up like it had something urgent to say. I was already in bed, half asleep, somewhere between a dream and the H of the day. Then I saw his name, Tyler. My sister Elena's boy, 15, the kind of kid who doesn't call unless the sky is falling. And maybe it was. My heart kicked. I sat up so fast it felt like my body already knew. Tyler, I whispered, voice dry from sleep. Is everything okay? There was silence, just the sound of him breathing like he was trying not to cry. Then finally, Auntie, can I tell you something? But you can't tell Mom. His voice shook, like whatever he was holding was too big for a kid his age to carry. I told him to tell me, no matter what it was. Another pause. Then he said, I think Uncle Dan is cheating on Mom. And just like that, the whole night cracked open. I asked him why he thought that. He said he'd been out with friends near downtown. They stopped for snacks. And across the street, he saw Dan, walking into a hotel, with a woman, not a coworker, not a family friend. Someone younger. Someone dressed like she was hoping to be seen, even though Dan was hoping not to be. Tyler didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just watched them walk through the hotel doors like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like they'd done it 100 times. Dan never saw him. But Tyler couldn't unsee it. And he called me because he couldn't sleep with that truth sitting on his chest. I thought I was crazy, he said. I just needed someone to know. I told him he did the right thing. And I promised. His name wouldn't leave my lips unless it absolutely had to. But when the call ended, I just sat there, in the dark, staring into nothing while everything spun. I thought about Alina, my big sister. Honestly. The one who once stood in front of a belt for me, when Dad was too angry to care where it landed. The woman who believed in Dan like he was some kind of miracle. I never trusted him. Never said it out loud. He was charming. Too charming. The kind of man who smiles at you with all his teeth but none of his eyes. But I stayed quiet. Because sometimes, you want your sister to have the fairytale, even if you've seen the cracks in the glass slipper. I asked Tyler for details. He remembered the hotel, the time, the woman's coat, black, her heels red. I looked up the place. Small, discreet business class. Not the kind of hotel you celebrate an anniversary in. The kind you go to when you don't want to leave a trail. I went there. No plan. Just the H in my stomach and the need for the truth to stand still long enough to grab. I smiled at the front desk, pretending to plan a surprise getaway, said my husband had stayed recently. The clerk's eyes lit up. Oh yes, she said. Mr. Dan comes in pretty regularly. Always books the same suit. My hands were cold. But I nodded like that didn't mean everything. That night, I remembered the little things. The perfume that wasn't Alina's. The late nights. The one time Alina showed me a text Dan had sent her by mistake. He called her babe. In a message clearly meant for someone else. She laughed. Said it was a joke. I didn't. I scrolled through Dan's socials, nothing obvious. He wasn't stupid. But a woman kept popping up in the comments. Subtle stuff. You always look sharp. Great seeing you again. I clicked her profile. Private. But her profile pic showed red heels and a black coat. It felt like swallowing glass. I messaged her anonymously. Told her I knew Dan's wife. Asked if she knew he was married. She never replied. But the silence, it was loud. I spent 2 nights at the hotel lobby, waiting, watching. Breaking inside. On the second night, they walked in together. Him and her. Laughing like they'd earned it. I took pictures. Clear. Time-stamped. No room left for lies. I didn't confront them, not yet. But I knew I couldn't carry this weight alone. So I called Dan. Told him I wanted to talk. He showed up. Probably thinking I needed a recipe or a favor. But I laid it all out. What Tyler saw. What I saw. What I had in my phone. He went pale. Didn't deny it. Just sat there like a man trying to figure out how fast a house can burn. He blamed stress. Blamed the marriage. Said it was complicated. It wasn't. He was cheating. And I told him either you tell Alina or I will. 3 days. That's what I gave him. 3 days to be decent. To be honest. To grow a spine. He didn't. On day 4 Alina was still smiling. Still planning their weekend. So I called her over. Told her I needed to talk. When she walked in, I couldn't even look at her. I didn't explain. I just showed her the photos. She didn't cry. Not at first. Just sat down slowly like her legs had been borrowed and the lease was up. How long have you known? She asked. I told her everything. Except Tyler's name. Not until she asked. And even then, I said, "He doesn't know I told you." She nodded. "Good," she whispered. "He shouldn't have to carry this." That night, she confronted Dan. A week later she told Tyler. He just hugged her, said he was sorry. And my heart cracked wide open, because he was just a kid. He shouldn't have had to see it. Shouldn't had to be the one to start this avalanche of truth. Dan moved out. No drama. Alina didn't want it. She said she was done defending people who couldn't pick her the first time. And somehow, in the middle of the wreckage, she began to bloom again. Not all at once, but I saw it. She started laughing again. Started walking, started existing like her body finally belonged to her again. And I think about how close I was to saying nothing, honestly. How easy it would have been to let her keep believing the lie because it was prettier than the truth. But silence is a kind of betrayal, too. And love, real love, doesn't let someone walk blind into fire. It wasn't my marriage, but it was my family. And sometimes love means telling the truth, even when it breaks everything. Because in the end, that truth didn't just free her. It freed me too. Some stories don't end when the secret is out. They begin there, in the quiet, awkward mornings after, when the house is too still and everyone's pretending they know how to breathe again. Dan was gone. His side of the closet, empty. His toothbrush, missing. His cologne lingered for a few days like a ghost that hadn't realized it was dead yet. Alina didn't talk about it. She didn't need to. Pain speaks loudest when it's silent. She moved slower for a while. Didn't cook as much. Didn't return phone calls. I checked on her every day. Sometimes I brought soup, honestly. Sometimes I just sat on the couch beside her, while we said nothing, and let the air fill with everything we weren't saying. Tyler started sleeping with his door closed and locked. He stopped asking to stay over at friends' houses. He became quieter too, and I wondered if he was carrying guilt, like it was his fault he told the truth. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, shooting hoops alone, earbuds in. I sat down on the steps and waited. Eventually he stopped, walked or sat next to me. "I broke her," he said softly. "No," I said. "You freed her." He didn't answer. Just stared at the grass like it had answers he hadn't found yet. I told him I'd rather know an ugly truth than live in a pretty lie. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't ready to believe that yet. Alina didn't cry in front of Tyler. But one night I heard her. I had stopped by to drop off groceries, let myself in with a spare key like always. And I heard it, the kind of sob you don't rehearse. The kind that lives at the bottom of the stomach, and only escapes when you think no one's listening. I stood in the hallway frozen. Because grief is sacred, and sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone fall apart in peace. Eventually, she opened the door. Eyes red, hair messy. She looked at me. Like she forgot who she was crying for. Or maybe just needed someone to remind her she was still real. "I loved him," she whispered. And I said the only thing I could. "I know." She leaned into me then, and for a few minutes, I was the older sister again. The one who held her when she scraped her knee, or lost her first pet, or called sobbing from college because she'd failed a test and thought it meant she'd fail at life. We stayed like that a long time. Weeks passed. Then months. Dan didn't try to win her back. He didn't show up with flowers or apologies. He moved in with the woman. The one with the red heels and the black coat. Honestly, Alina found out through a friend of a friend. She didn't flinch. Just sipped her coffee and said, "I hope he's at least being honest this time." And I realized then, she was healing, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, like a woman stitching herself back together, one hard-earned thread at a time. She changed her hair. Started volunteering at the local shelter. Laughed more, not the same laugh as before. This one had edges, but it was hers again. Tyler slowly returned to himself too, started talking more, even joked once about how Dan's new girlfriend looked like a villain from a Netflix drama. Alina didn't stop him. She just smiled and said, "Well, villains wear red heels too." I knew then she'd be okay. The funny thing is, no one teaches you what to do after the truth. They only talk about the explosion, not the dust, not the quiet rebuild, not how hard it is to trust again, even your own instincts. I started questioning everything. Not just about Dan, but about myself. Why didn't I say something sooner? Why did I ignore the red flags? Why do women so often carry silence like it's love? But I didn't regret telling her. Not for a second. Because the truth didn't just break her marriage. It saved her, saved Tyler, saved something in me. 2. The part that still believed we're supposed to protect the people we love even when it hurts like hell. Sometimes I wonder what Dan tells people now. Does he lie to her too? Does he call Alina bitter? Does he paint himself as misunderstood? It doesn't matter. He's not our problem anymore. Alina lives with the truth now. So do I. So does Tyler, and none of us are perfect, but we're honest, and we're still standing.
Healing doesn't happen in a straight line. It stumbles, it doubles back, it forgets where it was going, then suddenly remembers in the quiet between 2 deep breaths. It had been 9 months since Dan left. 9 months since the truth walked in, took off its coat, and made itself at home in Elena's life. She wasn't trying to meet anyone. Not really. She said dating felt like walking barefoot over glass you didn't break. But life, it has a strange sense of humor. And healing doesn't always wait until you're ready. It started simple. She signed up for a cooking class, said she wanted to learn how to make things that didn't come from grief. On the 2nd week he sat next to her. His name was Owen. A nurse, widowed, soft-spoken, not charming, not slick, just real. They talked about Basil, and how hard it is to cook for one, how silence gets too loud when the house is empty. He didn't flirt, he asked questions, listened like he meant it, laughed without looking at her mouth. She told me about him in the car on the way back from Trader Joe's. She said it so casually. Like, oh, I met someone. Like it wasn't the most terrifying sentence to say out loud after you've had your trust torn out of you and handed back in pieces. I looked over. Her hands were shaking just slightly on the wheel. Is it okay that it feels good? She asked. Even though I'm scared out of my skin, and I said, feeling good doesn't make what happened less real, it just means you're still alive. The first time she saw him outside class, they got coffee. He brought her a bookmark. Just a bookmark. Because she once said she folds her pages and feels guilty about it. It wasn't flowers, it wasn't a necklace, it was something small, but it said, I listened. And for Elena that was louder than any apology Dan ever mumbled. She didn't fall fast, didn't throw herself in, she tiptoed. But every step she took was hers. And Tyler, he noticed, he didn't ask, but one night he came into her room and said, you look lighter lately. She smiled, pulled him in, held him like she was holding her second chance. Not just her son, and me. I watched, quietly, protectively. Not because I didn't trust Owen, but because I finally saw her choosing herself, and I didn't want anyone to dim that light ever again. She still has hard days, moments where she scrolls too far back in her photo memories and goes silent, but now, those moments don't sink her, they just pass. Like ghosts that stopped being scary. A few weeks ago, Owen came to dinner. I watched her set the table with actual plates, not the chipped ones she kept after Dan moved out. She made roasted chicken, and the wine was her idea. She wore earrings, not to impress him, but because she liked how they caught the light. They talked and laughed. Tyler joined in, even teased her a little about how she burned the potatoes, and I realized we weren't surviving anymore. We were rebuilding this family, this broken but still beating thing. It didn't end with Dan walking out. It started when truth walked in. You know, people think betrayal is the end of the story. But I've learned sometimes it's just the beginning of one where you finally stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. Elena's not healed yet, not all the way. But she's healing, she's laughing again, this time with all her lungs. And maybe the bravest thing she ever did was believe that love didn't die with the last person who failed her. Maybe it started again the moment she said, yes, I'd like to try. You don't really know you're healing until you let someone stay after your first instinct was to ask them to leave. That's how it was with Elena, with Owen. With the quiet way life started growing again in all the places where trust had been torn out by the root, it was never dramatic. No grand gestures, no public declarations, just 2 people making tea at 9 p.m., arguing about what movie to watch, learning each other's silences without trying to fill them. It was the first night he stayed over. And I don't mean like that. I mean stayed. After dinner, after dishes, after Tyler had gone to bed and the wine had gone quiet. She didn't plan it, didn't light candles or wear anything that said I'm ready to start again. She wore an old hoodie, still had her hair in a messy knot. But she looked at him with that expression I hadn't seen on her in years. Like she was choosing not love, but possibility. She sat on the couch beside him, hugged her knees to her chest and whispered, "Can I ask you something? And can you not lie?" He looked right at her, didn't flinch. "Always." And she said, "Do you think people can love again after they've been lied to so thoroughly they start doubting even their own reflection?" Owen didn't answer fast, didn't try to fix it, just leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "I think love after betrayal is the bravest love of all." And she broke. Not in a shattering way. In a quiet surrender. Like a door creaking open after being sealed shut by years of silence. She let him stay. Not because she needed him, but because for the first time in a long time she wanted someone beside her. Tyler heard the front door lock. He knew Owen had stayed. The next morning he didn't say anything, just poured cereal, nodded at Owen, and asked Elena if they could get bagels later. It was his way of saying, "It's okay, I see it, and I'm okay." That afternoon Elena called me. Told me she felt guilty. Told me she felt guilty. Not because of Owen, but because some part of her still hated Dan, still wanted to scream, still wanted to rewind time and fix everything she couldn't fix. And I told her something I wish someone had told me years ago. Forgiveness isn't a door, it's a hallway. You walk through it one step at a time. And sometimes you have to sit down and cry halfway through. Weeks passed. Then one night it stormed. The kind of storm where the sky sounds like it's grieving. Elena used to hate storms. Said thunder reminded her of arguments. But this time, she made tea and sat by the window while Owen wrapped a blanket around her shoulders like her silence didn't scare him. And that was the difference. Dan had always needed noise. Owen could sit in the quiet and not need to be forgiven for it. Elena told me later, that was the night she stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She's not in love yet, not the way she was when she was 26 and reckless. But she's present. And that after everything might be the most romantic thing of all. She doesn't believe in forever anymore, but she believes in today. And she chooses it. Every morning she wakes up and lets someone love the scar without needing to touch the wound. As for me, I watch from the edges. Not interfering, just witnessing, because I remember the version of her that was folded into herself, shaking, shattered. And now I see her standing at the stove in that same old hoodie, laughing with someone who doesn't make her smaller, and I think, maybe the real love story wasn't about falling for someone new. Maybe it was about finally coming home to herself.